I was a
Righty out.
failed musician, and I felt extremely like an introvert.
This is
Now
about
looking out on all of you guys here today, I know that
the
I'm
environment.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of all the major awards,
But
SAG has won Best Track Record. Oscar winners with a success rate of more than 70%. Lily Gladstone.
it's about
That's good news
what
for Lily Gladstone, the first Native American woman to be nominated
being
for a Best Actress
thoughtful
Oscar.
about the
She won
environment
Best Female in a
really
Leading Role Award
is.
for Killers of the Flower
And it
Moon.
cannot
And also for
be
Divine Joy Randolph, who continued
disentangled.
her
Now I'm going
award
to, I've
season,
deliberately left
winning
this on.
Best Supporting
This is
Actress
just,
for her role as a grief-stricken mother in The Holdovers.
there are several
Football,
wires in
Chelsea will
this
take on Liverpool at Wembley this
that
afternoon for the
are
final of the English Football
disconnected due to the fact that
Blues
age.
picked up their first domestic silverware
Yes,
in
we all
60
know.
years.
Throwaway society. That's all you ever hear. Well, I find it amusing, not in a perverse way, to keep my old radio going. I've had to wire that. The aerial connection is worn out because so many times I've had to tighten it because they're so badly made. But okay, it's a kind of Heath Robinson thing. But this is an almost irrelevant point, but it is so much more pleasurable. I mean, you cannot disconnect the modern world from digital now. It's so much more pleasurable not to have to look at a screen, not to have to touch a button on a screen. Just turn the radio on. And in terms of the public message, now that sounds pretentious, but all my life I've monitored the public message. 50 years ago, a wonderful old countryman called Ralph put me under his wing, and I spent all my time with this countryman who taught me, nothing's changed, he taught me, an incredibly intelligent guy, but lived like a kind of curious, slightly eccentric, not tramp. He was a wonderful countryman. He would diligently be chopping logs for days on end for the biggish house, and I would spend all my time with him. And he knew then that there is this balance of, if you put chemicals if you make changes in the environment, the land, the ecosystems, nature will have a problem. Change in nature happens fairly slowly. But anyway, to try and keep to a point, what environmentalism is, and if you're in a city now, you see the environment, places, countryside places, places not in towns and suburbs, may seem so alien. But you see, there is actually the thing about how humanity is going to manage to protect, even the word protect is wrong, to just keep a balance between human existence and that of nature, is actually, now I've discovered over 10 years, and I need to write this properly, it probably won't be that long a book, but it's actually so much more about the individual's psychology. So that makes it quite interesting, because there's nothing more dull than turning on your, don't have one, but I could look up, I'm sure the Green Party have got a video channel. I could look at an earnest, dull person with no fun in, and it's usually her. They use women to promote, and she'll be, she'll have her hair dyed, she'll be tarted up, she won't be wearing old tramp clothes like me. I've had my cuffs, this is a very old shirt. Right, but I have to keep to an interesting point. If, as I have all my life, from the age of 10, I've been aware from somebody I love, we have to look after it. It's not about staging protests against sewage systems. It's not about being swampy and protecting woodlands from new motorways. Of course it is to a small extent. But the one thing it's about, more than anything, is personally. Well, if I say being authentic, that sounds pretentious. And that's not a nice word. Being authentic, what does it mean? That's for people who went to top universities and have got middle class, high achieving jobs. It's very difficult to find a word. It's just being, it's as simple as this. I've listened for 20 years, as it became fashionable, to virtually everybody, in fact, speak in terms of doing the work on one's individual soul or psyche or personality. Now, in my ralphschism.com, for one specific reason, I know somebody who's a good soul, because what does goodness mean? It means we can be honest about who we are. Even if we're disasters in terms of we're not managing to protect the environment, we're not managing to live in a way that's genuinely sustainable, i.e., for example, categorically the emissions, the use of stuff, molecules, man-made molecules or man-transported molecules, is so much more for people who live alone. And this is a massive thing that's just growing and growing and growing. Middle-aged people living alone. It's like that alone, if that were dealt with, if somehow a political party overnight brought in a financial incentive, you will get paid 20% more tax credits, you'll get your 20% knocked off your income tax or whatever. If you're a middle-aged person, doubling up, whether or not you have sex is up to you, but that would make, that is actually the one thing that could make a massive immediate change to overall emissions. Right, even the word emissions is dull, but let's get back to what I was going to say. 10 years ago, having had 3 or 4 years of like total personal head fuck, never losing it for 1 second, but it's like I began to, okay, right, the thing that's left to deal with, just as a serious member of society, but I was having fun. The Greens, etc., they entirely fail on something. There is nothing wrong with bloke or woman. If you're single, go to Green Party meetings, or no, not Green Party. It's just get involved with your local environmental organisation to find to flirt, to chat up. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's like your green people. I know them all, or knew them all in my last region. They're like, no, you can't have fun. Excuse me. You will do. One does one's job better if you're enjoying yourself and having fun. Right, but to try and get back to this point, virtually everybody for 20 years who's reasonably intelligent and not middle class, that's the wrong way to put it, just those who are more thoughtful, who aren't blatant, out and out Tories, self-interested, keeping to the correct word. Conservatism means retaining bourgeois existence. Britain and plenty of other countries really has such a bourgeois setting. But to the point, most of them will be saying, well, I do the work on myself. And this ends up in, oh, well, I've got several meditation tapes, etc., etc. I do the work on myself. I have to find the space. And this thinking and the way of communicating, I mean, I encountered an absolutely fantastic woman 2 days ago. And I hoped that she actually would do some work with me on this, on what I'm about to say. It's like every word is almost from a copybook. It's from, and that's not an insult. I've listened to this arise in society over 20 years. You're having a discussion, a great discussion, but it's like words come in like holding the space. And these are just bullshit words. And that's not an insult. Here's what matters. Here's what actual inner peace and esteem is. For example, now myself, I happen to have a childhood or teenage years where with my great mentor, and there were slight tensions there, he lived in a kind of wonderful tension with my parents who owned the land, and when the land wasn't worth that much. They'd accidentally ended up buying some land, kind of accidentally. Anyway, I took to him because I believed his version that we should steward the environment in a very, very sympathetic, thoughtful way, such that we don't just chop down all that undergrowth there because there's a beast or there's a whole ecosystem there that needs some of that left, blah, blah, blah. Right, to the point. This doing the work, or I'm sure there are new trendy ways of putting it, following sort of slightly guru-ish people. Sorry. All that matters is this. So I, as a young person, was pretty switched on to the environment, and I had actually a lot of animals. Personally, I actually bred rabbits when I was about 12 or 13. I had about 50 of them. I had a big rabbit breeding operation of my own, and I had not an expensive little pony, and then blah, blah, blah. I'm very aware of animals as being beautiful, magnificent, autonomous, magical things. The environment as being magical, and all my 50 years, it's like, I know it's all getting degraded, damaged, fucked around with. Here's the thing though. The thing that matters is my own behaviour over the years, and it may take decades. Am I living in a way in my private space, my ordinary habits? But the most interesting thing about that is when we have a crisis. I mean, we can have our daily ordinary habits, and I don't, but we could put them on Facebook or whatever in this last 15 years, which seem quite saintly. But the real test is when something terrible happens, when another human being just fucks you up the arse in a mad way because of their mad traumatic childhood or whatever, or they're different or whatever. Do we hold it together during the crisis periods such that we still maintain our sustainable, our don't be greedy, what is it, reuse, recycle, etc.? You know, that now, okay, that's only going to be kind of 50% of your, no, not even that, 20% of your lifetime use of molecules of stuff. Now, what I mean by that in more simple terms, so many people, when their relationship break down or things like that, it's like they can't work together to, a lot of the stuff ends up in a skip. Now, I happen to have been going around not monitoring, that sounds like I'm a telltale. No, the exact opposite. This is the reality. But going back to the key thing, it's like, if you want good mental health, now even that is a horrible phrase that's just now trotted out for everything. If you want to feel great, if you want to be constant, if you want to be at peace and centered, and I do not mean in Buddhist bullshit ways, okay, I mean as a Western person in the West, which is only consumerist, there is no spirituality. All spirituality is made up in the West. It is not lived. And I know what real spirituality is. I mean, this is all started, I went on The Guardian, living in the middle of nowhere 20 years ago, having had a relationship with somebody that ended, and I thought it was the big one. I was so fucking hurt inside. After a few months, I thought, oh God, right, I've got to. So I actually went on Guardian Soulmates Dating, and it was like compulsory to fill in that box. I'm spiritual but not religious. Now, I don't know what actually, I know what, if anybody knows what spiritual means, it's me, but I will often say, I don't really know what it means. And I communicate and write and think about that in a truly good way, good for me. That sounds a bit show off, but I'm not terribly interested. What matters is how do we retain our inner core strength, but in such a way, a rock-like way that is benign and useful to the rest of to people around us. That's what matters, peace and centeredness. I always sleep perfectly. And thus I'm useful. I'm not going to get angsty or let anybody down, or faced with a crisis, not think of, I mustn't chuck stuff in skips. I must try and make sure everything is protected, blah, blah, blah. So this thing that you can call it authenticity, but what is it really? It's just being true to who. Now, most people are multitudes, but there's kind of perhaps a higher level of multitude. There are certain higher level traits. I mean, for 50 years, it's like, don't trash the environment. I mean, 18, 19, we'd go into the small town, 3 miles. I lived in the middle of the countryside. When we were driving, I'd go into the small town, have 3 beers, get a bit too, and this was before drinking and driving was basically, everybody did it. And yeah, I'd chuck my chips wrapper out of the side of the car. I had a few years when I was a horrible little bastard, but came back from that, okay? And I still think about it. It's like, but let's avoid the angsty periods when one is a troubled teen, okay? Generally speaking, most of my life, I live as close to that pattern of that blueprint of reduce, reuse, recycle. Okay, it's as simple as that. But that's not some kind of thing for it to stick on a fridge. Is a fridge magnet sign. It's like that's me deep inside, and figuring what that really means in life. I happen to, and I don't even like saying this because it sounds show off, because that's the point. Environment, or rather being kind to the planet, must not be show off. But I really did. 25 years ago, my daughter was born. I don't think anybody in the world has ever given back a commercial pilot's license, which I'd had for 17 or 18 years, because I knew that wasn't compatible, although I didn't like having, I flew for an airline once, I didn't like it. It's too many dickheads around, alcoholics as well. So it's like, right, I'm going to stay in the private, the small charter sector of aviation, but that's not compatible with my daughter's life. Stupid, I know. What's one person giving back their commercial pilot's license? But that's what authenticity is. And God, that was like, after 3 or 4 months of that, it's like, wow, I did that. I would never have imagined I could do that a few years ago. I mean, I actually met my daughter's mother because I was doing a little contract in Poland. It's like, and that was a really interesting few months, and blah blah blah. But it's like, I never imagined I can do that. But that's being true to a real kind of core person that I've always been, and because I do care. Okay, you can call it selfish. If I go for a walk along the pathways, I don't want to see any human. Not that keen on humans in certain ways. I don't want to see any wrappers, any bits and bobs. I don't want to look into a stream and see, oh, there's a bit of human chemical waste coming in. So, but it's so interesting, this. You see, it's like, that's what it's really about. Now that, it's a huge, a law could come in tomorrow with execution tagged along onto it, saying you must not waste anything. Now, it would take a bit of time, but gradually that would work. You'll get executed if you drop one bit of litter, if you waste something, if you waste food, you will get fucking executed. Now, I'm not saying that, no, it's never going to happen, but it would actually work. Just like we had a law come in, nobody wore safety belts when I was in my teens or first started driving. Law came in, everybody pretty much wears safety belts. that law isn't important. What's important is this, all of this rather self-indulgent, because it's gone too far. It's like people ultimately have got empty lives because they're not getting out and having enough relationships or whatever. So it's become this kind of world of self-obsession, like I'm your relationship guide and all of this bullshit. Well, but that's become about, yes, but you've got to have done the work on your soul. But what does that mean? It means only one thing. It works if privately, as I've been for 30 years, not turning a camera on. It's like privately, when I wake up in the morning and sit for 2 or 3 hours, I'm actually thinking, yes, but I've left a bicycle somewhere, which I have, which it's getting rusty, but I can't do anything about it. This is such an inhospitable, fucking horrible Surrey. I wouldn't even feel comfortable asking anybody, can I put it in your shed? So it's like, but then have I failed? Have I failed to, in doing myself properly, at the level of the Surrey mentality that lives all around here? That they pretend otherwise, but they totally are. My little bit of land, my little shed. You're not really coming in to my life. Because, anyway, let's not go on about my slightly unusual existence. Anyway, right, I'm going to make now an audio, which is much better, and I'm going to try and do it in 30 minutes. If you want to know if you're 30 years old or you're 60 years old, what do you really need to know? If you're 60 and you've got kids, or you look after, mentor a young person, what do you really need to know about the environment? Right, I'm going to try and put it into an audio. It's just 30 minutes now. So, there we go.